All right, guys, we are back. Thanks for sticking around. And I'm going to continue the show by talking about the current state of Hearthstone, which has been a very big topic.
Yep.
Wait, hold on a second. Hold on. Give me 1 second. Hold on. Yeah, you guys are still. All right, there we go. Now they can hear you. All right, so current state of Hearthstone, big topic in the community. I've had lots of people talk about it on their streams, on YouTube videos, on Twitter, and including all of us too. But I figured Frodan probably hasn't gone all in because I know Dan keeps a lot of like his full thoughts,
I can't
restrained. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you can't. You just can't.
Because if I go all in, that's the rest of the show. You guys are not talking. If anybody
It's fine. I don't mind if I don't talk.
I tend to just go on and on.
Hey, man.
And then one person in chat just says one thing that triggers me again, and I go all.
You're back at
it. That's Frodan's stream, man. If you ever watch
right
Frodan's
back
stream,
in it, dude.
it's good stuff,
You
man.
think the last load is done? Nope.
All right, so let's talk about it. God, how do I approach this? So first things first, let's talk about, I guess, just the current state of RNG in the game, because I think a lot of the sentiments lately have stemmed from just how RNG is being used right now, in terms of design. And I figured let's talk about both good and bad RNG in Hearthstone, and then we'll talk about just like where we're at right now in terms of just the design. So for you guys, how do you guys just generally feel about RNG in this game? In a card game like this game, yeah.
Okay. So randomness, unfortunately, is why we play card games. That's I mean, everyone can already accept that there is good RNG. People who don't like RNG and they can't accept any form of RNG, card games aren't for you. Just that's already a given.
Yep.
There's lots of good RNG in Hearthstone, and we don't really acknowledge it because we don't really think twice about it. But I mean, there are some ones that we do acknowledge, like Discover, for example. Discover is very good. Bad RNG has been usually pinned on things that we can't necessarily interact with or control. One of the targets, of course, being Yogg-Saron and Barnes. I think these are two cards that people really don't like because of how swingy and the high variance that they are. And I think what ends up coming down to the point is people just want to have card games which they feel rewarded. It's not necessarily like what is good and bad RNG, because it's always debatable. You can debate across anything. You could always say like these things take a lot of skill to play, or it doesn't. Or you can play around it, or you can't. There's a whole list of like ways you can define interaction and all these different things and semantics. I think what people really care about is whether or not they feel satisfied, because Hearthstone at its core is not just a card game; it's a strategy game. And if you can feel rewarded, or you can feel like you outplayed your opponent enough so that you can feel justified in taking the victory, that's good. The bad, when it starts getting really bad in RNG, in my book, is when the winners don't feel satisfied. They feel like this is not the way I want to win. This is not the way that it was very fun. Maybe some people care about winning to the point where they don't care how they win. But for the vast majority of players, they're in the winner interview at HCT and they're saying like, that sucked for both of us.
Or I shouldn't
really
have won.
The way that went down.
Yeah, or I shouldn't have won. That's the worst words you want to come from a winner.
It's because it sabotages it undermines their entire effort. They played 20 minutes or an hour's worth of exhausting strategy, and then all of a sudden they had to just rely on something that was extremely variance driven, and it undermines their accomplishment too. So they feel not satisfied, and of course the losing player is salty as hell because they lost and they felt like something was unjustified. So this is what is, quote, the bad RNG in my book, and I can definitely echo that sentiment. So that's currently what people are
right.
If I summarize it.
Noxious, what do you think? Good and bad RNG definitions.
Examples? It's kind of broad. I mean, I don't know. There's always been talk about bad RNG since. I mean, there was talk of it back in the early beta with the Shaman, Hero Power, and Lightning Storms. It's not anything new, and you can't really interact with whether or not Lightning Storm's going to do its thing when you're literally on a 25% to maybe roll, and then another 50 to maybe roll. It's like you almost can't rely on those to win. So the discussion's always been there. I just think right now the issue is just how many dice I guess are rolled during a single game, like in which classes do it, because it used to be that RNG was this Ragnaros steal, the Sylvanas steal, there's like which secret did the hunter play. So that's not really RNG in and of itself, but it's one of those things where you have to make a guess and just go for it sometimes. So there has been variance in the past. It's never felt as though every single match you play contains it. Like every single match you play, I don't know if a deck really. There aren't that many. Like I guess like the warrior decks, the cycle for the OTK, but I can't think of a deck right now that has literally 0 roles. Like even Murloc Paladin's running this cover with the RV Knight. So
yeah. I mean the volume of RNG is definitely something we're gonna be touching.
I think that's for sure. Mostly the problem is the threshold more so than the kind.
Well,
like I think so.
I'd say yes.
So the counter to this, I'm sorry to interrupt, ChanManV,
Go ahead.
This is actually a very popular sentiment, and it's completely justified in terms of feeling. But the opposite spectrum is when we have things that are extremely consistent. And we had a meta like that where it was Druid, Patron, Warrior, and the Handlock. Yeah. And the reason why is because they drew 25 out of 30 cards in their deck on average per game. And they ended the game the same exact way. The consistency was mind-blowing. And to the point where every game felt the same. And that's actually the point where it got extremely boring. It wasn't like Hearthstone was actually, in the sense, the better player usually tend to win because of Patron and Handlock being very skill-intensive decks. Druid, not as much, but still relevant enough. And it got to the point where like it just wasn't very fun anymore. Like sure, the better player was winning, but then how do we balance the entertainment factor both as a playing and as a person that's watching? Yeah. So this is the two extreme sides of the spectrum, right? You have one that's extremely dry, boring, but very consistent, and then you have the one that's like really wacky, swingy, but not reliable at all. And all of a sudden we're like, it feels like we have to choose one or the other, but it's not true. We can find a middle ground.
But middle ground, which is probably what people want.
Yeah, for me, the bad RNG has a lot to do with the power level of it too. Because I think bad RNG is one that swings the game to the point, or can swing the game from, like if we're going to quantify it, it's just at least something like the extent of swinging a game. When you can swing a game that would take like multiple turns to like get out of, or maybe even like potentially 3 or 4 turns at times when you see Yoxron swinging a game. I think that's when it starts becoming like, oh my God, that was literally almost like coin flip to win like a miracle coin flip to win a game type of feel. And RNG that maybe cost you a turn, I feel like is more palatable in terms of a lot of the players, even the pro players. Like people of course still complain about the knife jugglers and things like that. But the flame juggler, that's a pretty strong card too. But they don't complain quite as much about those cards because it's like a half to a turn type of penalty if the right thing happens.
I mean, there's variance that affects all kinds of things, and I think the bottom line is that what the players are asking for, and this is when I say the players, I mean the players at the top level.
At the top level,
yeah.
The players at the top level are. I'm not saying the entire player. The top level players are asking just for a little bit more edge, because that little bit more edge goes along. Firebat did some number statistics, and I usually trust him because Firebat actually does diligent mathematics.
Yeah, he does.
So, like some people just kind of estimate based off of their feelings, but he tries to do it. I mean, he's not always right, but he tries. And he says like even if you improve consistency of the top players' win percentage, or the favored players' win percentage by like 1 or 2%. Then it like over a course of like a 7-round Swiss, their chances of advancing to the top 8 jump dramatically, like 3 or 4 or 5-fold. And that's like a huge boost. And if you think about it, the current win margins of someone in Starcraft, and I know people are going to cherry pick, but generally the average Starcraft player, 60-65% win rate. And if a Hearthstone player is just like 57, 58, it's not that different, but it is big difference. Like 7-8% is a huge difference. But if you just bump it up a little bit, it just starts showing a lot more consistency. We're not asking for the same person to win every single Hearthstone tournament. We just want to be able to see narrative and storylines at tournaments that we can feel attached to. Otherwise, we're just constantly in a group of strangers who we don't feel any attachment towards. And the people who are there are only the people who end up sticking around are people who just like to see explosions and numbers go up and down. That's kind of what ends up happening if you just take away the narrative of tournaments.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And there's nothing we don't having one person win every single tournament is definitely bad. But we need to see repeat winners like in this community. Like it's so hard for somebody to win twice. Chalky almost won he almost won his second one this past weekend with the ONOC tournament. But Frozen winning one, like it's so funny because Frozen has finished top 4 in a lot of tournaments, and it wasn't until like this weekend that he actually wins one, and it kind of like just solidifies something, which in this type of game, it feels kind of wrong that you have to win something to kind of solidify that with the community.
That's kind of a different discussion, though.
I know it is.
That's a completely different discussion.
But it is
like
about
how much we
consistency.
care about top 4s and top 8s and yada yada.
Sure,
I think that's just like another topic, because like repeat winners in a card game is like needing them. I think is just kind of incorrect. Like you almost can't ask that of a card game to always give you repeat winners at the top end.
Well,
it's good if it happens, but like needing it to happen, especially with this, like the number of people involved, that seems kind of difficult to achieve, like ever.
Right,
But
which is why, and I've said this like many times already in the past couple of appearances that I've done on talk shows, but it's like we emphasize who wins too much.
Right.
I think we need to reward consistency, which is like getting top 8 already is. I don't know, I think something absurd, like if there's 128 players, the chance, and assuming like you're 55% favored against most people, you have like a 4% chance or less to get to the top 8. That's so hard, man. And if someone's able to do it multiple times, it's insane. In China, for example, there's a guy. Sorry, let me back up. In China, there's something called the Gold League, which is like the equivalent of our DreamHack or Geico events, where it's like it's completely open. There's thousands of people that sign up, and there's hundreds of people that show up to the venue, and they always have to close it because there's just too many competitors. And they play best of 3. Okay, they play best of
really
3.
I know, that's crazy variance right there.
I can't believe best of 3 this in 2016. That's another issue for another day.
Literally.
But there's a guy that's top 8'd at Gold League like 3 or 4 times. Despite the fact that they've had 12 tournaments or something like that, and it's best of 3, and he has to go through thousands of competitors. This guy is insanely good, but he never wins. He always gets like top 8 and loses, and the community doesn't care about it. They don't think twice. But this guy is insanely good, and yet this is permeated throughout the rest of the community in Hearthstone. We don't care about players who make it to the top 16. We actually see them lose right in the first round, but the process of getting there was hell. And in a handbasket. So I feel like a lot of the culture has to change a little bit and how we reward it. But even more so than that, let's say a player does win a tournament.
Yeah, we don't even give enough credit to those people.
How do they advertise themselves? What they start saying is like, yeah, I'm going to start streaming because that's the way they know how to convert off their win to gain popularity. They start posting their deck list. They start writing guides. But only a few people who actually follow that end up supporting them, and then they have to go through this very long, arduous 2-year process where like by the middle of the second year they can finally start seeing results. And I know, and the reason why I can say this is because look at the guys who become popular now. Tice is starting to experience a huge surge of popularity this year, but he's been around since 2014.
He's been winning
your favorite players.
Exactly. That's true.
Beating your favorite players like Kalento and Amaz and Reynad back then. And people could always just say, Tice, Resident Sleeper, blah, blah, blah. Like, I can't believe he played. Remember, he was playing Handlock and Druid all the time? And we're just like, wow, who is this random unknown guy? It takes so long, and it takes, like, nonstop beating over the head. It takes, like, an incessant amount of appearances to the point of nausea, where, like, a player shows you how consistent he can be. And then finally, they start accepting him. It's the same with like with a lot of other people who are starting to become popular now. Even Dog, for example, too. There's a lot of people that are actual great Hearthstone players and superstars in the making, but we don't give them a chance because we keep clinging on to the established players that we have now. Which I'm not saying you shouldn't support them. I'm just saying that we should open up our minds more as a culture. Well,
the thing is. Gosh, I mean, it has a lot to do with the culture of Hearthstone, and it revolves around streaming. Like, just be frank about it. Everything in Hearthstone is like it's Hearthstone in a lot of ways. At least a large part of it is just a collection of streaming communities. I mean, we do have a core Hearthstone community too, in which you see like maybe super late at maybe not super late at night because there's just not a lot of people up at night. But when a lot of the top streamers aren't streaming, you get a better sense for what those numbers are like. But a good portion of Hearthstone is streaming communities, and that kind of plays into whether these professional players actually win tournaments, transition into something that's accepted by the community. I mean, if they're super entertaining and it transitions into a very entertaining stream too, then that's like the perfect formula, right? But some of these guys just
Scott
aren't.
did it, for instance.
Yeah.
Like just didn't give a shit about
Right.
streaming, and
yeah, but he doesn't.
like
I mean, it's hard to say for him because he doesn't even stream, so you can't really measure how that is. But there are a lot of top players that have done well in tournaments, have been streaming for a long time, and they still don't have that magic moment happen for them. And yeah, guys like Dog, it's happened for. Dog has this whole other thing going on in his stream too. That's funny, and entertaining too. If you haven't watched the stream, and Tyson,
sure, yeah,
Tyson's probably a little bit more like a better example, where it's just he's funny at times too, but he's more or less just a straight
likable,
good
dude.
player. Yeah,
You
he's
almost
likable and he's
can't
great.
You can't dislike him. Like, it's just
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's
So
almost
I mean,
impossible
he's
to dislike the guy.
might be the only one right now. I guess
he's a really good example of how to do it right, in my opinion. I think a lot of people are trying to either become just a streamer, and they're not necessarily giving themselves room to grow. If you just think about it, for example, what are some of the greatest meme moments or things that let's just I really hate the word meme these days because I feel like we're just overusing it. What are some of the most fun things about our community in general? And it usually revolves around jokes about tournaments. If you think about it, like all the times when Reynad and Fireback counted to 29, or you think about Orson that Gormok has 4 minions.
4 minions. Oh my god.
That we've ever had, or like Ecop accidentally frostbolting himself. This all exists in the context of competition. And I think a lot of people forget, or a lot of players forget, that they actually need to start competing to start introducing more variety of content. Because this is what happens in Hearthstone. And I've said this on my stream. I've written blogs about it, but I didn't publish it because I felt like it was too. I think it's not. I'm not trying to point swords at popular streamers, but what ends up happening is that they start segregating themselves from the community. They start isolating themselves in their bedrooms, and they start streaming the same exact type of content 5 days a week, 6 days a week for 8 hours a day, playing doing exactly what essentially is a TV show's rerun. They're just playing ladder. Oh my goodness, I got lucky. Oh my goodness, I got unlucky. Oh man, let's just cut 30 seconds of this and make this a YouTube highlight. And then they repeat and rinse and repeat for God knows how long, doing the same exact thing. And they wonder, they have the audacity to ask or to become jaded and negative. Like, what do you expect to happen? You're sitting there getting exposed nonstop, not only being able to experience yourself being unlucky, but also being traumatized by chat blasting you nonstop.
Yeah, sure, every time.
Criticizing you or stream snipers. And, there's so much exposure that no wonder, dude. No wonder they get exhausted of it. And then back to my previous thing before I was getting worked up. They have the audacity to be shitting on the game. The game that made them popular in the first place. The game that gave them everything that they have, any kind of relevance or presence. They say, this is a terrible game. I hate this game. This game is awful. You put yourself in that position. You cornered yourself. The streamers need to get out to events, man, because no wonder they go insane. They lock themselves in
alone in their little bubble. It's an echo chamber of their own thoughts at that point.
Well, so
no wonder. Like, what do you expect?
All right, so let's talk about that a little bit. Okay, let's talk about that a little bit.
But okay, let me. Sorry,
I'll let you finish. All right, finish.
I know I'm saying a lot, and I know I'm not giving you guys a talk, but let me just say this last point. But the reason why I don't blog this and I talk about everything and just lay it out is because I don't think they're at fault ultimately, because events kind of suck. They're not that fun. So what are the streamers supposed to do? They either give up a lot of their presence and money, and also, in a way, help. Like tournaments are very. I think the term is just cannibalistic. They just cannibalize the viewership. As a result, if you give up a weekend of streaming, you're not only losing progress, but you're also helping something else grow, and as a result, kind of take your own little bit. So I don't blame them for what they do. I just think that the current the ecosystem, the current tournament formats are not compelling enough. There's not enough incentive for the streamers to go out, and as a result, they're kind of stuck doing this entire thing, and that's what kind of builds up this negativity cycle. Because then the streamers are saying, and they're the most influential people in the entire scene.
Absolutely,
they're the ones saying things like Tuskar needs to be changed, Yogg is stupid. Barnes is imbalanced. They're the ones saying these things, and then people who really want to play the game and they really trust their opinions also latch onto these ideas. So then they start discussing these things, and then a lot of other people start seeing these discussions, and then Blizzard starts seeing these discussions, and then it kind of feeds into this whole idea of everything is terrible, and
everything is a problem. Let's just I could see that. Like the thing is, like positivity is worth more than people maybe recognize. Like it's one of those things about the Hearthstone environment, especially where you have to maintain it because the game will hit you in the face repeatedly. Like just like last week, for instance, I was more than pissed at the game just because like I haven't been really having too much fun just with the new meta game with Karazhan and whatnot because I thought it was a huge lost opportunity for people to just have like try out new stuff. And then the problem is like I actually bothered going to Legend and it turned out that every single win I got with Control Warrior was like, oh, he didn't roll well on X or Y and I won. I felt like my decisions were pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
More or less.
It's
another discussion entirely. But
well, we're going to dive into the specifics. We're going to dive into the specifics in a second.
Yeah. And like what ends up happening is that the players, and so this is what happens. The players that do go to tournaments, then they start delegitimizing their own
achievements.
That's the problem,
making fun of everything by not pretending like they spent 25 hours preparing the 3 days before. They spend 8 hours a day practicing.
Insane.
And then they get on stage, and then they're just like, I just played Yogg and won. And it's like, you motherfucker! Like you're
full of shit.
So hard.
Okay,
it's
so
true, man.
Even if it's kind of true, like even if I do agree that I think that something needs to be done about Yogg, and I do agree. Like everyone's gonna start saying like, you're just you're a paid Blizzard employee. It's not true. I'm not paid by them at all as an employee. I just take their money to talk about their card game. The only thing is that the players are doing such a disservice to themselves and the scene by making people not respect their wins. So then when they win the tournament finally, of course they don't care about your win because you spent 5 events before that taking a dump on every winner and taking a dump on every the people that you don't seem worthy of the victory. It's like you sow what you reap, people.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy type of thing. Yeah, and
I said that completely backwards. You guys know what I mean.
Yeah,
God,
I like saying what I reap. I mean, there's like it's a never-ending cycle. So I guess in that way it kind of works.
So it's not every player though. And I can speak to Frodan this past week. You know, we did a mini bonus value town on Monday. Thanks again to 1A Gamers for Ungeiko and Team Lake for allowing us to do that. And we got a chance to interview Frodan. And one of the things that he said that was really compelling is that he thinks that a lot of the pros are. I think I don't want to quote him. I'm not going to be quoting him exactly because I don't have to quote with him. But paraphrasing is basically he thinks a lot of the pros are just relying on RNG at this point instead of getting, putting some more work in and getting a lot of edges that he feels like he's getting right now when he's playing. That was like, okay, all right, that's kind of an interesting way to put. It's an interesting standpoint to hear, given that we've just been hearing about a lot of complaints of RNG. That's somebody again that's been having consistent results, and even this weekend, with consistency. So, I think it is a big deal, like that the players really just investing into their, their their livelihood too. And one thing that you did mention before, Frodan, and I want to talk about is just that we talk about streamers staying home, right? And a lot of that has to do with efficiency of revenue. A lot of people, all of our friends have talked about it. They go on events, they lose subs, they lose, they like probably could have made thousands of dollars. They're leaving thousands of dollars by going to on the table by going to these events. And even if they win at times, they're still losing money, and that sentiment is very, very strong right now. And so incentive to go to the tournaments is one thing, but what are those incentives? Like, is it just larger prize pools?
So
is that all we're talking about?
It's definitely not prize pools. Prize pools, everyone thinks is the answer.
It's not the answer.
I don't know. I think it's just solely based off exposure and also just like the value it has to be able to go out and experience something fun. It's a really big portion of why people are drawn towards some of the streamers in the first place, because they're intrigued by what happened in a tournament. What ends up happening too, and this is also going back to the point where like streamers kind of lock themselves in this vicious cycle. They start growing in viewership, but at a certain point they hit a wall because they're not actually introducing anything new. They are new for a while.
Sure.
The fact that they're streaming in the first place is very refreshing. Their personality is cool, but after a certain amount of period, for some people it's months, some people it's years, but they hit a wall and they can't grow anymore. And then they start blaming the game again. And it's like, no, it's because it's not the game's fault. You've just done the same exact routine, the same exact magic show 100 times, and we've just we're ready to see something new. So they move on to other people who are doing that. Like Tice, for example, I think he's a fantastic example. He's still competing. He's still trying to put himself out there. He sometimes goes to tournaments to try hard. Sometimes he goes and experiments, but he's still traveling and he's still streaming and trying to be very faithful. But it's exhausting. Like for him, it's really tiring, and he has to start making decisions. Is this event worth my time or not? I think, it's going to get to the point where like streamers need to start diversifying their content. It's like they have to figure out a way that it's not just about dollars in that moment. If you invest in like the fact that you go to these tournaments, you're also investing in the scene. You're developing the fertile soil so that more people can appreciate the tournaments. If you invest in the tournament, and I know this sounds like I'm some presidential campaign, like I'm Kennedy saying like, ask not what Hearthstone could do for Hearthstone. But it's so true. If the personalities are willing to lend their names and make a tournament worth fun, imagine if C-Story didn't have any popular players in the very beginning. Then that tournament would never have really taken off.
Any tournament.
You have to, right. And then all of a sudden, if you really think about it, the past few C-Stories that we've had didn't really have that many huge names really show up. I think Reynad is like one of the only people. I think Forsen coming to the last one was really cool. I love that Forsen came out. But a lot of people just kind of dipped, Savitz and Amaz and all of them. They're not really showing up anymore. But yet C-Story continues to carry on. If we're willing to lend our names and invest into it, then the scene gets more rich. We're not just people stuck laddering until the end of time, trying to grind
it's more of
the cycle of legend. The ecosystem is more to support it, so that way people who enjoy those tournament content can get it, and then the streamers can also get additional types of content themselves by inserting themselves into that. But again, it goes back to the point where events need to incentivize that. So I think in general, the fact that the ecosystem is primarily Hearthstone Championship Tour and events that feed into it is abysmal. I think that is the worst way that you can support it, because that means we're all in on HCT. That means our entire bet is that the storylines and narratives are driven by HCT, and that's the most important thing. And that's not the way it should be. And in my personal opinion, I don't think that's the way Blizzard wants it to be either, even though they kind of do, because in the end, being a world champion is awesome. But HCT should not be the end-all be-all. There needs to be more established and better third-party tournaments, but they're just not happening right now because everyone is being safe. That when they run these tournaments, they're doing the same exact thing. We're going to do this many people, like 100 players, and we're going to do best of 5 conquest with 1 band.
And then sometimes they're like, let's bring an extra deck, and you do 2 bands.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Okay, wow,
what 7? It's like, oh, well, now actually, and there's a weird correlation where like, or the more decks you actually bring, the less diversity you have.
You have
to bring the same deck.
It's true.
It's like, well, everyone brings Shaman at that point. You can't target it.
Yeah.
So it's like it's one of these really loaded things. So to summarize the fact that I've been talking way too long,
who cares?
Everything needs to improve, and I
haven't
even begun
started
to go on what Blizzard can do.
Yeah.
I haven't even started to tell you guys what Blizzard needs to start doing too, but they need to pick up their game too. Everyone needs to improve across the board. So starting with the tournaments and the organizers, starting with the community and the culture that we set, to the players and personalities and what their expectations are. In Blizzard, everything needs to improve, man. And it's not just one area. People think Blizzard could fix everything. It's not true.
No.
They need help from everybody, but they also need to get their shit together too. But I talked enough, so you guys.
Frodan fired. I mean, it's better you stop talking at this point, Frodan. I think you're one step away from crossing a line.
This is what you don't see from him on Twitter. There's only 128 characters on Twitter, and at times you do see it on stream. But this is great. I mean, I agree with pretty much everything you said there, and it's a difficult thing because it actually takes you giving up something, like in terms of, like you said, the players, maybe even the event organizers too. Maybe they have to incentivize them in a way that they didn't want to, but incentivize people to come to in that way. But it does take giving a little bit of yourself just to improve the overall ecosystem of the whole thing. And that is a hard culture to, it's hard to change culture like that, especially when all these people are trying to make a living doing it too, right? Like everybody's always looking at the immediate future and not looking at the long-term future.
The long-term.
Yeah. So that's a difference. That's something that, like, I was gone for a year, right? And when I left, I felt like the community was still in that state where everybody was going to all the tournaments. We were, I think it was during ATLC, like we had the first ATLC and everybody, there were these events where we saw everybody at, just and it's cool seeing all the players together and the streamers together, all the top players. I mean, even the pros that are not as popular, but they're at the same events as all the big streamers too. And I feel like we saw a lot of that. And then I was gone for a year, and I was still watching stuff, but I wasn't following the scene like I was, just because of other things. But when I came back, I felt like the Hearthstone scene and community was a lot different than
it
I
dissolved.
remember it.
It
Didn't dissolve. It just, like I said, it just kind of insulated itself. Like everybody insulated themselves into their own community and growing, that, which is very important. It is very important to be able to make a good living and sustain yourself by doing that. And it's smart too from the streamers. But we've lost that sense of community in a lot of these things. And it's risky too, because, I've told other people too that, once it gets to that state, what happens when these people just leave Hearthstone? Like, God forbid that, right? I mean, these guys do still like Hearthstone, and they still, get the most viewership, and they make the most money still being in Hearthstone. But
you're talking about the personality.
yeah, what if like the Forces
big
leave
personalities.
Hearthstone and the Crips leave Hearthstone?
They should leave. They should leave.
Yeah,
They should leave. The ecosystem, in any kind of healthy ecosystem, things die. Things are born in, but things die, and you kind of need to. And that's just how it is, So if someone wants to leave, they should leave. And you know what? Honestly, I think they'll be back. Because Hearthstone's one of those games where you're going to step away for it for a few years, and then when all it takes, okay, this is what I'm saying. Mark me down. This year is 2016. Today is September 7th. It is 2:20 p.m. in Pacific Daylight Saving.
Okay.
In the year 2020 or later, Hearthstone will be
or
amazing.
later. I like that, so that's pretty good.
Or later, because it might take some time. Because I don't know Blizzard's time. Blizzard's ways are not our ways. But in the year 2020 or later, Hearthstone will be fucking sick, dude. It's gonna be amazing. There's gonna be the tournament systems are gonna be finally shaping up. We're gonna actually have player history and legacies to draw narratives off of. We're gonna have a lot better formats to play. Hopefully, there's features. The social aspect of Hearthstone will be great. All the people who are just, wee little fuckers are going to be weeded out, and all the legit good people will be rising to the top, and so on and so forth. But the player base will already have been battered and weary and suffered long enough that they can't really tell. Except there's going to be one weird thing that happens. Maybe Blizzard releases 2 great expansions in a row. It's going to be wild to think about, but it's statistically possible they totally can. They released 2 great expansions in a row, and I think they can. They're definitely capable of doing it. I mean, League of Explorers was great. I actually really like Wizards of the Coast, so there you go, 2 in a row.
Yeah.
Then everyone just turned like, you know what? Maybe I install Hearthstone. Then the nostalgia hits them, because 7 years ago they installed Hearthstone for the first time and realized how fun it was, and they realized this expansion's good. Plus all the new stuff comes out, and then it all hits them at one point. They're like, wow, you know what? Maybe I should get back into it. And they start sharing it, and then there's going to be a small revival of Hearthstone that might end up making that stabilization point. And I think the reason why we're so frustrated is because we see all this potential right now, but it takes Blizzard and takes them so long to be able to figure it out that right now all the real answer to all of our problems is just time. It really is.
At this point, that's exactly what it is.
That's the big problem.
Well, it doesn't.
I've been talking about that with some people. Like, we were at the live event in Toronto like last weekend, and I ended up discussing the Hearthstone, like the immediate problem of Hearthstone, and how it's something that can be fixed. Like, it doesn't even take that much. Like, give us 2 expansions and a single rotation, and if things actually got better, then people might actually just be happy at that point. But the thing is, like, right now, and with the time between releases just feels so long that I think it's just like a culmination of a lot of stuff that leads to dissatisfaction, as opposed to like this one little thing. So it's just like a snowball effect, I guess, of people just getting mad. Like, there's a chance, like, what are we, September? Like, I don't know what's gonna be planned for BlizzCon, right? But like, if something big is announced there for Hearthstone, that could be like another big thing for Hearthstone that just ends up bringing people back in, at least happy level wise, right? Not necessarily like, the game is just better. It's just people are satisfied what they hear, and plans are announced, and suddenly Hearthstone looks good in 2017. RNG Fiesta might not be completely, fixed, or at least a lot of the facets of it that people dislike, but there's a chance. I think it's just like when Blizzard finally decides what their design philosophy is, like every single thing that they want to do with the game, they've got like this clear vision of what it is, and they go that route and pursue it without being afraid of shaking shit up, then I think we're gonna have a great game on our hands. But
Yeah,
until
I
then,
completely
it's
Yeah, I mean,
they're learning so much, man.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I know.
Chan.
well, they are learning a lot, and the thing is that I think, you know, we're partially to blame, guys, for where the state of the game is too, because of our feedback, just from the standpoint of 6 to 12 months, whatever, 18 months ago, you know, back when Druid and our hand lock and all that
Rest
stuff.
in peace, Patron
We
Warrior.
yeah,
Rip
Patron Warrior
Patron.
too, and I mean Patron Warrior was like the perfect example, because Patron Warrior was a deck that all the pros loved because it took, you know, a lot of skill to play it at the highest of levels, but at the, you know, I guess the lower ranks.
Let's
where
not
most
fool
of
ourselves.
yeah, but I mean
That's not where the rose tinted glasses. Patron Warrior in that iteration was totally.
it was okay. It was broken,
Yeah,
with
but
the
was-
not
it was not
necessarily because of
fine.
the Patron.
frost.
Maybe
frost,
not even because maybe not even because of Warsong Commander, but because of Frothing Berserker.
Frothing
yeah,
Berserker,
Frothing Berserker
100%,
was-
yeah.
yeah.
But
Okay,
whatever.
so
Charge.
there were changes then, but
That-
my point is that, like, you know, we've complained a lot about just like it not being fun at times, and I don't know if Blizzard's taken that feedback directly and then just like tried to, you know, basically do their best to, you know, solve that problem by coming out with these kind of wacky cards. I don't know what their, you know, again, like their 12-month, 24-month plan was for all these releases, but all I'm saying is that we could be the product of some of this that we're seeing right now, just of what we did in the past. And another thing too is that I want to say is that, yeah, time is a big thing. You know, that you know, Frodan, like I'm on the same boat as in the same boat as you. Is I think that Hearthstone will be, you know, in the state that if players do leave and they come back, they'll be engaged again. But the thing is like I want it to happen sooner, because we're in a place right now with Hearthstone where it's super popular. Like this is the peak. You know, this is the peak of the player base, maybe even just like the total installed player base or whatnot. And I'll give you an example with Starcraft 2. Starcraft 2 right now is in the best state like that it's ever been, in my opinion, from a design standpoint, from ladder, from WCS, like all that stuff. Like all that stuff was refined. It took Blizzard 6 years or 5 years to get it to the point where it is. But this is happening now that we know where StarCraft 2 is really not on the radar it used to be. You know, not like, you know, one of the top like esports it used to be. And I don't want Hearthstone to have to go to that, because people aren't going back to StarCraft. You know, like we'll play it every once in a while, but we're not going to go to it. And there's other reasons for that too. But we run the risk of that if it takes too long with Hearthstone. There's going to be competitors coming out too. You know,
you're 100% right, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
you're 100% right. It's like they can do everything right, but is it too late? You know, StarCraft is
Yeah.
fantastic now, but no one cares enough to like really create a lot of traction. Like
Yeah.
StarCraft does have a very dedicated, loyal following, and the people who do that, I really envy StarCraft fans to a certain degree. It's like to be able to be that dedicated and that loyal to it is very good, but it's just such a shame to where they used to be. And I say that coming from StarCraft. Not a lot of people care about the fact that Legacy of the Void is fantastic. It's such a good game, but I completely agree. And that brings us back to, like, you know, just addressing currently what needs to be done. I think one thing, and I haven't actually discussed enough about what Blizzard needs to do. I think one thing that the Blizzard needs to do is acknowledge the
it.
fact that
Just
Hearthstone
say that
is
it is.
completely
Communication. Yeah,
Agreed.
let's be more transparent about things. Yeah, we've got these developer updates, and they're like the first step. It's good to hear, you know, see Ben, and Ben is like Ben's really just the face of the entire team, guys. You know, it's like he's not the only guy, obviously. So we need to just hear more. And I'll give you another parallel. Like the Overwatch team, I felt like has been very, very transparent, and it's just like it shows me what, you know, they could be doing, which is coming out, trying things, and if they make a mistake, revert it back. You know, I think we'd be okay. This is
If that game
this is
has
a digital
anything
game
good,
too.
it's their PR or like the communication between the devs and the community. Like it's. I mean,
They
it
haven't
was
done
like
everything
a little
right
bit of a
either.
blunder with the whole summer thing. Like everything's not perfect, but it's definitely like the beginning of it.
Yeah.
Like the fact that they started off on that foot was a huge deal. But I even remember, like in the early days of Hearthstone, like even the info we could glean out of Team 5 back then, like the team was a lot smaller, so obviously they didn't have as many people and didn't anticipate what would happen with the game. But even then, like the answers we got were on the very safe end of the, like, I guess, community management, like spectrum. It's insanely like, it hasn't changed. I feel like a little bit it has, but ultimately the stuff that we receive as info is never an acknowledgement of mistakes. It's almost never that. And if it is, it's like veiled in well, here's kind of what we think we did right about this complete fuck up. And I don't know if that's enough for now. Like for now, it's probably okay.
It's a start.
But,
No, it's
man.
an absolute start because
Yeah.
not knowing. I mean, if they don't say something, if we don't know that they feel like they made a mistake on a card, then we think that they think this card is good, right? Or they think this is exactly where they want the game to be, and that's what's concerning to a lot of people that don't like where the state of the game is.
I think even more than that, though. I mean, you guys are saying great points. Like the fact that they should just be more transparent. First of all, Ben Brode being willing to show his face.
I know. He takes a lot of shit.
Purified, dude. Is there one person in the world I don't want to be on whatever day that was?
That's so
or like
true.
hell dropping is like to show a video. Like he could have just made a blog post, or a twit longer. But he decided to show his face and record a video. That takes balls, man. If anything, we can acknowledge that Ben Brode has big cojones.
That was a great video.
Yeah, he has going.
That was a good video.
But what a lot of stuff has actually significantly dropped since then. We don't have statistics that are very transparent. We don't have data. Remember they used to release infographics of like how many leper gnomes died or something like that. That was really fun. Like when they tracked all the stuff, like the play rates of stuff. The point is that Blizzard's not really communicating and acknowledging a lot of these things with us. But even more than that, it's like I feel like they don't necessarily truly acknowledge what's also happening, and they kind of isolate it to a vocal minority. So for example, I tweeted something the other day where I said that people are dismissing certain complaints on a subreddit because they think it's isolated to that subreddit subscriber count. And that's not true, because people who see that are not only sometimes not subscribed, but then you also have people who reference that on social media, and then that gets influencers thinking about it on their Twitch and their YouTube videos, and then journalists start talking about it, and then all of a sudden your reach is not just a couple 100,000 people out of millions, it is millions out of millions. Because of the way information spreads. Just think about it. Like I wanted to ask a Hearthstone developer. They never officially answered me because I think it was one of those things where like we have to go back and check. But I said, can you go back in time and reference how long it took for one streamer's popular deck? Like imagine when Reyna created Zoo, for example, on stream, and then how long it took for that to have a significant significant appearance in the database of how many players or percentages players have started like copying that deck. Information spreads like wildfire in Hearthstone. And so because of this, and I think we can argue that it's very fast, Noxious is 100% on the money, where content's too slow. Like it's too and it's not enough. Hearthstone is consumed at a rate where it's just not like any other card game. We have streams, we have YouTube videos, we have deck guides and articles, and we have podcasts, we have tournaments. It's consumed so fast. It's kind of surprising that even with a card like as ridiculous as Yogg-Saron, which I remember Ecop said in chat that Blizzard's not willing to take risks. I think that's Yogg-Saron is a clear example.
That is a huge risk, right?
This is a huge risk, and they took it. And cards like even Lock and Load and everything like that, they took big risks on whether or not those cards can be good or not.
Was
that could
definitely
potentially
a risk.
be stupid.
Yeah.
But they're willing to do like potentially broken stuff. The issue is that they're not willing to really like go back on certain philosophies that they have. They're not willing to like push even a little bit more content in. Like they don't want to do more than 3 content cycles right now because they think that's very good. They don't want to overwhelm the casual player base. Totally get it. Very rational. But things like the balance patches, why did that come in like a week before the expansion? Because they don't want to overwhelm players with changes. But the fact is, Hearthstone's consumed at such a much more at a much higher rate than any other thing. It's like the fact is we need this game to be much more dynamic. We can't just have it the way that you guys feel like it is, because the truth is the player base moves so much faster for it, and viewership directly correlates with that. To sales and to a game that's microtransaction heavy. Why would you not want your game to be advertised correctly? There's over like 100 million minutes being consumed on Twitch for Hearthstone alone. That's insane, let alone YouTube videos. Like what Quip does.
Just have more
That's
confidence.
directly marketing, and they're just not capitalized on this because they have a staunch philosophy on how they want to address the game. And I totally get it. I totally understand why they make the decision, but the truth is the times are different.
Yeah.
Times are different, and they have to kind of start considering adjusting their business plans or whatever model that they choose to follow after.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. We had that discussion, I think, with Raynat at some point, talking about like the release of new cards and like the ways they could do it. But like even beyond that, like what kind of surprises me with the way Hearthstone's like the philosophy has been kind of shown since the game was released is just how weird it is, because it seems to be disconnected from what the game is truly appealing for, like what people like in the game. I mean, you not changing cards isn't the fucking reason I picked the game up in the first place, and it's never going to be that. Like, sure, there's a point where it becomes obnoxious because you change every single card in my collection every week, but you changing a card isn't going to make me quit the game. What happens is I relearn the new environment. Like, the game is a card game, and that's a genre that's basically been unexplored by a very, very large segment of gamers just because it's dry. Like, the typical way to put it is dry. Hearthstone succeeded at making a card game enjoyable to watch and play. And it's not because they decided to make cards that are never changing in nature. So, like, I just don't get why that's a tenet of their philosophy. They're just not willing to alter. And it's the biggest gripe I've had with this game since its inception. Like, the fact that we actually, like, a lot of the changes, you know, that weren't really seen, like alpha, beta, yada, yada, but a lot of those things just should have never happened. You know, Miracle Rogue coming out of alpha is a fucking disgrace because we had the deck figured out and, you know, it was played on simulators and it was told to them, reported on forums, but it was never picked up. It took how long until Leroy was changed? And I mean, I understood it back then. Team is small, but nowadays, is there even an excuse? Like, it just kind of tilts me to think about.
I think the
excuse is that philosophically.
Yeah, exactly. Philosophically,
I get it,
they just changed
but it's a really
releases.
like, it's nonsense. It's just not what Hearthstone is good for. Like, there's a ton of things the game like appeals to you, like all the little facets of it that appeal to you, but none of them is that. Like, just none of them.
I would just say the one thing I would say to them is just have more confidence in the player base, like even the casual player base. Like, players and people that play games like Hearthstone adapt very quickly.
I don't know, ChanManV. Have you seen the reviews on the iTunes store? Sometimes I periodically check reviews on the Android Google Play Store or the iOS store. I'm just like, oh god.
Why'd you delete my collection, Blizzard? Right. I paid for Dr. Boom.
Go on.
I think Frodan. I mean, you're gonna get those, all right. I mean, of course you're gonna get those, but that's not the majority of people, though. I mean, you're never gonna have, like, you're talking about iTunes, dude. I know all about iTunes reviews and stuff, man. Like, I used to, you know, have to pay a lot of close attention to all that stuff. But in the end, it's about what in the long run is going to be best for your game, right? And if you have to take a little bit of a hit, like let's just talk about like a mass wave of changes, good or bad, buffs, nerfs, whatever it is. If you change existing cards, then that's almost like a release in itself. Like, you don't always have to make new content. Like, you know, one thing that we should probably talk a little bit at least about details of like, you know, situation with cards right now. Why don't we do that? And we can talk. I was going to bring up like just power creep and just power levels right now. But let's talk about just issues with certain, like, particular cards, right? Because people are griping about, you know, the Yogg's run. What is your thoughts on Yogg's run? Just so we can just like put it on record and know where we're working from. Frodan, because you've said multiple things about Yogg, right? Because you've said it's entertaining. Yeah. It is entertaining, right?
It is. Yogg is extremely fun card.
Fun to watch.
But it's the fact that it's as competitively viable as it is not healthy for the tournament scene.
Right.
But I mean, I love it watching it on streams and stuff. So it's a very good. It's kind of like it should be in Major Domo territory, but unfortunately it's in Golden Monkey territory. Yeah. And it ends up becoming like Golden Monkey was already a lot of variants, but it was like cool variants in a way, and because you don't see it all the time. But you see it all the time, and now it's got. So I think for tournaments, I'd like to see Yogg take a little bit of a backseat. Even though we don't see it that often in many decks, the decks that do run it are very powerful.
They're very popular.
And also, I think you know what's one of the biggest tragedies that's really ironic is that that version of Druid is actually pretty hard to play and one of the hardest decks currently. Besides like OTK Warrior,
it's overshadowed by a lot of
Priest Mage, like very hard. And then all of a sudden Yogg, and it's like it just compromises the entire difficulty of the deck. You know, normally you can have a star rating, it'd be like 4 out of 5 stars difficulty, but because of Yogg Saron, it loses a star too. It's too bad.
Yeah. Noxious. I think it's pretty clear. What do you think of?
I mean, I don't even have any thoughts about Yogg.
Yeah.
Like, I just, because at first when we saw the card and we kind of looked at it before the actual playing of it became a factor, it was just this type of card where you're not sure how to evaluate it. It looks like it's pretty powerful, but is it going to become like a staple in many decks? And then it turns out some decks just want to play it no matter what. Even Warriors now, some of them are including it in their list because they run so many cheap spells for removal. Yogg is a card that I wish they just actually change to become that meme fiesta thing where, you know, instead of being one player plays all the spells, it's both players play a certain amount of spells. So it's like they're both memeing each other into like an equilibrium where no one really gained anything on average, so people don't include it, but it's still super fun for the casual player who just wants to see spells flinging from both sides of the board. Like there's ways to make the card not competitively viable and still be super fun. It's like I look at mind games. If mind games were, you know, let's say 3 mana, and we lived in a control meta game, like that's just disgusting because it's just cheap enough that sometimes you hit an 8/8 and you win, and sometimes it's just got a little bit of extra not competitive because of 4. But I think Yogg could use some of that bump.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that Blizzard thought Yogg was good. I think they thought it was too random to be controlled.
Yeah.
Because it said like it could target anything. They're like, well, you could target yourself with Fireball. And it's like, well, they thought that could be balanced in it, but after it's always difficult because their balanced team is 4 people. I think it's like Mike Donay, Reels, Max McCall, and Ixar. And then we have millions of players playing millions of games. So the numbers are very, and they have to see a year ahead in advance too. So they were playing Yogg, you know, a year ago. So it's like hard for them to foresee Yogg being as overbearing because they had to move on to testing the next phase of stuff. And then, you know, they have to be able to see things in perspective. And that's why it's important that they're willing to acknowledge things and go back and patch stuff or allow us to ban cards, which, you know, again, that's a little bit of a sore point for ChanManV because ChanManV tried to ban cards in the tournament and specifically got asked not to. And it wasn't because ChanManV didn't like those cards, it's because those cards were bugged straight up. They were showing mana cost. They were going to get nerfed.
They had already announced that they were nerfing them.
Yeah,
I still couldn't ban
the mana costs like adjusted too? Like Leroy was already 5 mana and stuff, and then there was like, if they were to play Leroy, it'd be.
It was Leroy and Tickmaster at the time.
Like Tickmaster or Spark, which was
both of those were those were problematic cards at the time, and they had already announced that they were not going. I mean, I'm not going to get into it, but basically, yes, they don't like banning cards, and that that's an issue. I mean, that's definitely an issue in terms of Yogg Saron. If you're not going to change the game, then you know the events. It doesn't have to be. I mean, it's kind of suck because again, this is leading back to HCT being like everything like storyline wise competitive, that if you don't allow the ban, then it's just like we're just stuck with the card. And your point about just them being 4 people and us being millions of people, then our feedback should be hugely taken into consideration. Even faster. Like changes should be made based on the feedback of millions of people. And you can there's a lot of crap on Reddit, but there's at least tens of thousands of legitimate posts about like why it's not good. So,
can we just appreciate that we're not right on Menagerie Warden? Can we just appreciate that
we can
the Yogg Druid is so fucking busted? Like the Malagos Yogg is so busted and has so many angles for you to fight off against that Menagerie Warden just looks terrible in comparison. Like
right now, but eventually
we appreciate that's garbage.
Right now,
one of your things that no one's talking about, that Beast Druid is not taking over the way people thought it would.
But I'm half happy, but at the same time, I'm like, the only reason it's not like a deck people play is because the alternatives, like people have tried actually making like the Beast Yogg shenanigans, and it works pretty well. But then you look at all the alternatives you could take, and it's like, well, I might as well just play these 8/8s, which don't require any buffing, and punch you in the face on turn 5.
Yeah.
So it's like different world.
So we're talking about cards. I want to ask your opinion on this because I made a video like I don't know how many, like a few days ago or something like that, and this video got very mixed reviews, like a lot of downvotes, a lot of upvotes on it, and I talked about a few things. It's like one of these current state of Hearthstone things, but one of the things that I talked about that a lot of people disagreed with was one of the things that I think is wrong with the game right now, and there's a lot of people that think this is one of the more fun things about the game, is cards like the rogue cards that were like Swashbuckler and Huckster, as well as Kabbalah's Tome
And Babbling Book.
Babbling Book.
Yeah.
The concept of giving players random cards, particularly cards that are just not in their deck, I feel like is leading. It's like one of these things that we all thought was fun in the beginning, but for me, I'm starting to see it as like problematic, especially in the highest level or competitive levels, because I think fundamentally with Hearthstone, or at least this type, and this is my first TCG again, guys. So like, I didn't play Magic and stuff, but for me, like Hearthstone, one of the fundamental aspects of it in competing against another person was having knowledge, limited knowledge, but have some knowledge of what they're playing. Like whenever they play a certain deck, it may take me a few turns to kind of figure out what they're playing. But if I know kind of the meta, I can kind of understand what it is, and I can make reads and make plays that I think will be efficient on my side. Now, when you start adding random cards to their deck, then that's when I start feeling like, oh my gosh, this is like, I have no idea. So I almost end up playing a form of arena all of a sudden, when this is not what constructed and standard was meant to be, at least in my eyes. And I was thinking just generally, maybe from a design standpoint from Hearthstone, and it's another one of those things that feel a little bit RNG, too RNG from the standpoint of just like your cards, like that you hold in your hand. And want to see what you think about that. What are your thoughts on that?
I can see where you're coming from. I also disagree pretty strongly on that. I think I do agree with the sentiment that if there's too many things to play around, then you just can't play around it. Babbling Book, of course, being one of those things. But same as like Ethereal Conjurer, and we love Ethereal Conjurer Discover stuff. I mean, and if you think about it in very abstract form, Ethereal Conjurer is very similar to Kabbalah's Tome. Because it's discovering 3 cards, except you get to choose all of them just at the expense of the body. And there are things that you can play around, and to a certain degree. It's like, okay, he only has 10 mana. He can do double Fireball and Frostbolt. So there is range to play around. And the reason why this is important, I'm not saying that RNG is like amazing all the time. I'm saying that the reason why, to counterpoint you, is that if you have things extremely consistent, then once again, games will play out very similarly all the time. Part of the reason why the variance is there, and if you guys have never read that article that the MTG devs wrote on randomness and how it can be a useful tool to create actual skill in terms of differentiating lines of play, then you should go read it, because it's a very fantastic read, and I think a lot of people can back that up too. Certain cards with randomness are actually very good for the game, and I love Ivory Knight. I love everything about it. I love the fact that
Ivory Knight, as an example, is a little different because it gives information to your opponent. If it's not played, if it's not played at when you have 30.
Sometimes it doesn't, but
it does have that aspect of it. So there could be, you could at least limit the range as to what it could be.
Yeah, so I mean, I completely get what you're trying to get at, but I don't think those are the real culprits. I think the culprits are like Yogg, where it's like, here's like the really funny thing. In a lot of ways, Yogg is actually too complex. Because
I know.
Too many
That's true.
things to account for. You have to account for what's the chances of you clearing your own board, clearing his board, drawing a card, healing yourself, healing your opponent. Like, there's just way too many factors, so it's best to just simplify it, just not worry about it. And that's when it's problematic, when it's like the range is just like way too crazy. So, for example, Spellslinger. Spellslinger was another good example of, I think, just like, or Unstable Portal. These are the things that are like too difficult to really accommodate for. The portals that exist today, you kind of understand the range. They summon a certain mana cost, so you can kind of get like, okay, I can either have like a 2/2 at the worst scenario, or maybe a 4/4 at the best scenario for a 2-drop. So you kind of get that idea. And I completely understand what you're saying, ChanManV, but I'm just trying to counterpoint you, preside the other argument.
Sure.
Yeah, and just to throw one counter argument to that with the Ethereal Corruptor, it is a card that we all loved, I think just when it was out. The issue, I think the reason for that was just because we only saw it maybe once or twice in a game. Now we're starting to see Kabbalah. So I mean, we're seeing Mage get like 8 additional cards to their deck. It has a lot to do with volume too, and it was more palatable.
That's what it is.
It was more palatable when you didn't see much. But dude, now we see like rogues stealing like a ton of cards. I mean, we used to only see it in Thought Steal, and Corruptor came out. It's like, okay, this is like something new too. And we did have Unstable Portal, but again, it was just like once or twice. But and it was already talked about back then, at least in Stable Portal. But now we're seeing like, man, they just go full out, man. We're gonna add 38, and we got Prince Malgazar too into your decks, and I mean it's just this one thing
that
I
card's
feel like.
super funny.
Yeah,
I got
know,
Harrison twice. I got Harrison twice.
What? I didn't
by
even
a warrior that had Prince Malgazar.
Oh, nice.
He got 2 Harrisons back to back. Oh man, that was crazy. And one of them was my. One of them was like. Here's the thing.
One of them was one of your moats, yeah, probably.
He played the first one against my control mage. I was playing
Okay.
Steve, and so I had Atish, and or Tish. I don't know how to say it.
Yeah.
So he played the first one to bait me, as if like, oh, okay, so he played Harrison because he knows that mage doesn't really have it. And then I played Medivh, and he hit the second Harrison. I was like, what? I was like, blew my mind. It was
That's
crazy.
awesome.
Like, how did you get the second copy of it,
I got
dude? This is
super
Yeah.
salty
crazy.
at that point.
Yeah.
That was ridiculous.
Actually, what do you think? This whole thing.
I think it's just like the threshold of how much RNG there is. Like, there's like a world in which Discover is okay, for instance, but I think there's a world in which Discover, like, imagine every single card in your deck has Discover. Like, the mechanic is great, but fuck it. Like, just delete it from the game at that stage. And I think we're just at a point where every class just plays stuff that rolls a dice at some point. Like, Raven Idol, for all I love it, I think is just getting, like, I can't stand it anymore. Like, I absolutely cannot look at this fucking card anymore in combination with Fandral, because the range of what they could get is just... It's absurd, like the stuff they could combine it with when you're talking about 2 random cards, one of which is a minion. And then you stack that with double idol during a game and, you know, all the stuff it does. And then if it's not that, then it could be a Moonglade Portal roll, giving them Sylvanas and some of the slower decks that you run the whole Yogg shenanigan. And then you look at Shaman, it's like, okay, their Storm's going to roll, their Maelstrom Portal is going to roll, their Tuskar Totem is going to roll, their Hero Power is going to roll, everything's going to roll. And at some point, I just give up. I just play stuff, hope that they don't roll well once or twice in a row, and I can do it. But every class has those rolls. Like, we're talking about all those good classes, but even Priest, for fuck's sake, Onyx Bishop and Resurrect. Like, I'm gonna bitch about the fact that the minion they get is random. It's just irritating that there might be a game that's decided once because this dude gets like a really good card from Shifting Shade, and it's happened all the time. And then the second time is just because, well, Sylvana's still something good, and then she gets resurrected on the first Onyx Bishop, and then Resurrect later on brings back not a Pyro, but it's another Sylvanas. And then it's just, everything just adds up. And it becomes this game where you stop, like, you can count the odds all you want, but one bad roll will just completely take away the entire, like, I've had series that I casted, which it was just so bad recently where the game was super fun and super good until like it got to like 5 games, but like last game of the series was first dude just coins out a Tuskar Totemic, rolls a Manatide, and it never dies for like every turn. It's just one of those things where the entire series is invalidated by one event in one game. One event in one game. It's just like, it's too much to me at this point, but maybe I'm like in the minority.
It's hard to say. I mean, yeah. Because of the way it ended. If that happened on game 2, I think you wouldn't really.
Sure, but I mean, like disregarding the match, though, the point as a whole is just it.
No, you're completely right. Like that shouldn't be like the way it ends. Just it's terrible. It feels that way, and that just kind of summarizes the way Hearthstone presents itself. It's very in your face, and you get the lasting impression. It's you know, people only remember the final Yogg. They don't remember.
It's true.
remember
there's a lot of whiffs. Yeah.
Remember Rainhead's YouTube highlight where he's like, wait to Yogg to play the very last second, kill himself?
Yes.
Turned out he missed 1 damage earlier that game.
I know.
That's true.
He could have killed his opponent,
That's true.
not have to depend on it. But people would just pay attention to that last moment, and people remember that enough. But how many times do we not spot that? You know, it's one of those interesting things where, like, one thing that's extremely surprising as a trend is that we're starting to gravitate more towards being extremely data-driven in all of our conclusions in Hearthstone, which I really like. I really love the fact that we're statistics and percentages and data-driven, and yet Hearthstone's completely anecdotal. Oh, sorry, not Hearthstone. Yogg Saron is completely anecdotal for now because we can't calculate stuff. And I really would love if Blizzard could have a candid conversation, maybe not publicly, maybe they talk to just the influencers and stuff, just kind of like talk about the actual data behind it. Like, how many games is Yogg actually winning? What if it was something absurdly low? What if it was something absurdly high? And then it's like one of these things that we have to talk about because and that's why I was talking about transparency and communication to a certain degree.
Makes sense, actually.
And
that's
something that some developers do, and I really would like to do. Because it's fascinating that all of our discussions for a long time is like, Aggro Shaman's too good. Its win percentage is 55 across the board. But then Yogg Saron's too good because it makes me feel bad and I'm salty. So it's one of those weird balance. Same thing with Patron Warrior, right? Patron Warrior statistics was awful win percentage wise, but the feel was so bad.
Sure,
It's
on
an
ladder it
interesting
makes sense.
conversation to have. Personally think that we should just take it into our own hands. Like Blizzard doesn't have to ban Yogg for their own competition, but
Yeah, at
maybe
least
we can do it
allow
for our own.
allows people
Outside
to
the
Yeah.
contest
circuit,
in
just do
events.
your own like ban list, and I think
Yeah,
that's probably
but
one of the
that's
most
hard,
elegant
you know?
solutions because it also puts like it kind of puts pressure. If the tournament becomes legitimized by the community as a whole, then I mean, who's Blizzard to say no? You know, this is
But
they can't just put up like an iron wall and say fuck you, your decisions are crap outside of our little circuit. But at some point, they have to acknowledge that because the entire community wants this, and because they've been so much about, they've been saying this since the earliest days. Is we'll wait to see what the community wants. They're like too big to just take that first,
Well,
like, first meeting, I guess.
Yeah.
But at this stage, it's like I think if people start doing those events, Blizzard will have to follow suit and in some way, or at least address the concerns that those tournaments are trying to address.
Well, don't they? I don't think if they are. I mean, I don't think it should be them thinking about the community driving, what their game is going to be. Like they shouldn't take it like that. They should take event organizers as essentially like sample testing for them as to what's good. We can try all kinds of different things, and they don't have to necessarily invest anything into it. And whatever we feel like doing, if it bombs, it bombs. If it ends up being a success, they can take that into account, and they can integrate that into HCC or HCT or whatever their main product's going to be. So I hope they're not taking it from the standpoint of that, because then you have this kind of feeling of a bit of arrogance kind of thing. Like they're right in what they want. I mean, they obviously control. They control the IP. They control the game. This is their game, so they can do whatever they want with the game. Sure. But we like to think as a community that they care about how we feel about the game too, right? So hopefully they don't take it like that. Okay, yeah. I guess any other comments you guys want to make? In terms of power level. I wanted to ask you guys power level. What are your feelings on the power level of the cards right now in Hearthstone? Because there are definitely a lot of cards in the sets now. A lot of cards aren't even being played. And I know the topic of Inspire cards came up when I made that video, and I was saying that, some of the Inspire cards actually aren't bad. It's just power level wise, it's just not even close right now, because we've set these certain standards for how good cards are. And I gave an example of like 1-drops, right? Like before we had 1/3 1-drops were like rare and powerful, and the classes that had them, they were just iconic to them. Now we're just like, 4-statted 1-drops. That's happening all the time. 3-drops, 3/4 is like normal body nowadays. And so we're seeing power levels just increase, and that's kind of natural. But I just want to see like what your thoughts are, the levels right now. Noxious, you want to speak? You want to talk about it first? What do you think about it?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the big things to remember about this is that this can be changed whenever Blizzard chooses to.
Yeah,
it's kind
absolutely.
of like an arms race that they have to pursue, right? It's like it's the typical power creep problem. To make cards exciting, you have to make them, an alternative, if not a straight up upgrade over other stuff that's appealing enough that people won't just play it. Like it's not too well statted that people play it for the stats. Like that's one of the things that, like that's what people were worried about with Barnes, right? Just like you play Barnes because of stats. Turns out some decks play it that can abuse it, but not every single deck runs it. The variance on it is another component, but the stat line of it, just baseline, is like still within the range of stuff that's okay. But the problem is like the effect combined with that stat line might just frustrate people. So I don't know really if there's any like what kind of bothers me, I guess, like the power creep level wise is the something like Think From Below, right? Like you look at Think From Below and you look at stuff that had been printed in the past. Light of the Wild is a good example. Jewel the Fang for synergy cards. Like all those cards that tried to push archetypes. Like Junkbot. It's a very old example, but like they tried to push this archetype into existence by printing cards. And Think From Below is just a card it's just good. And the power level of that card synergizing with what's like the core of the class feels really odd. It's like Monsieur's Challenger was stat-wise a mess. I think should have been like a 6/4. Great effect. I love it, but a 6/6? It's just Dr. Boom, not a 7/5. So I think that problem's been around for a while, and I think it just comes down to them reviewing their old content when they're about to release it. I don't know how much of that they do. I just don't.
I personally think that power levels in Hearthstone are fine right now, partially because the way Standard reset everything.
Yep.
If you guys can remember, right before Standard hit, we were playing one Fiery War Axe in a lot of Warrior decks, which can that blow your mind or
That
what?
does blow,
It's
yeah,
like,
exactly, right?
if you needed more proof, go back into Wild and try to create a Patient Warrior deck, and you start thinking maybe I don't need Ravaging Ghouls, or maybe not both of them. Obviously I still put one in, but maybe the second one's debatable. Not sure. Like these are all these crazy things where like the power levels, it just kind of gives you perspective of how strong everything was. And I think Standard's really important for the rotation because they don't want another expansion like TGT. And contrary to everyone's opinion, since we're supposed to talk about the fourth one, Karazhan is not the worst adventure out there. In fact, if you look at League of Explorers, there were a ton of unplayable cards. I think I think me and my friend were counting. It was like 21 or 22 cards at best were playable, and some of them were fringe, like you don't really see them played very often, but you might see them occasionally. League of Explorers was great because the flavor and the legendaries were updated. That's pretty much it. And then the adventure itself was. But Blackrock Mountain has way more playable than that. And Karazhan's like kind of right in the middle, I think. It's definitely got a lot of good stuff there, and I hope that it continues to flesh out. But as the expansion's released, like, they don't want another TGD to come out. So I expect the expansion this year, at the end of this year, will be nuts. I think it's going to be really powerful. But then you kind of reset stuff, and then a lot of the really powerful stuff at the very beginning of the rotation set. So, obviously Tuskar is going to rotate out, and Emperor Thorsan and all these dragon stuff. Yep. Then the power level will drop again. Then we're going to see it kind of go through the swing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's one of these things though where there's a lot of cards that are unplayable in Standard. Obviously, when they release cards, they do probably take Arena into content too, guys. Whenever they're releasing, so a lot of these bad cards
they do, but it's like they also like kind of don't. If you really
oh my god, seriously, right?
Like no, it's true.
Smokes.
Like they do, but like I know this because. Arena is just not that big of a played format. People like to complain about it, but I really want to ask how many people are actually playing Arena. They like to say this as just another reason to be upset at Blizzard, I think. But at the same time, does that give excuse for Blizzard to not really? Okay, ChanManV, how many Arena runs have you done past month? Noxious, how many Arena runs have you done?
0.
I don't play Arena, but I don't really care about the issue.
For some reason, everyone has a problem with it. Look, it's
well,
the truth
I don't know if I'm the
a huge portion of the player base plays Standard.
Yep.
Of course.
A lot less people play Wild, and a lot less people play Arena. Now that said, I think it's a vicious cycle. I think the reason why it's not is because Blizzard doesn't pay enough attention to Arena. If they actually made Arena a much better draft format, in terms of just everything, if they improved Arena a lot, then more people would play it, and then that gives them more reason to pay attention to it, and the cycle goes on and on. I think because of the neglect they showed Arena, it ended up making it less of a concern for them as time moves on because people just gravitate less toward it. The arenas, the rewards aren't nearly as good, or all this other stuff. There's probably a lot of reasons, and Crypt's probably the best expert on it. But I think part of the reason why it feels like Blizzard doesn't care as much is because that's the way that it's kind of been cultivated towards it. The cycle.
I mean, just servicing it. Well, it's one of those things too that the team just isn't big enough, to potentially be supporting all of it too. If I don't know, one guy like Mike or whoever it is just like said to be the Arena guy, then that's not enough, right? And we've seen issues with Arena in the past, and there are definitely some players in Hearthstone that are dedicated Arena people and they voice their opinions, but I don't think we've seen it to the point that it is right now. And I can't speak for myself because I don't play Arena, but when I hear Crypt talking about it, I have to respect what Crypt says about it, and in like a lot of the videos that he's talking about. And some of the things in Arena, I feel like could just literally just be a rarity thing, a rarity change, which yes does involve dust and how things appear in packs, and for all of us that are trying to get the cards. But it's a huge thing in Arena, changing something from a common card to a rare card to an epic card, right? And I feel like them missing on that, those type of cards is a big deal, right? And a lot of people are speaking out that normally just don't say too much about it. I mean, they have their normal kind of salty complaints, but not to the point where it's just like, hey, we got to get them to change it. And I think that's what we're kind of seeing with Arena. I think the Arena population is, I mean, obviously right now with it being in the kind of crappy state it is, it's low, probably lower than it's ever been. But I don't know. I always felt that the Arena was somewhere around the 10 to 15% of the total population play Arena. At least when I talk to other folks that I feel like are experts in the arena, that it would be something like that. Maybe it's less. I don't know. Is it less in your mind, Frodan, than like 10 to 15%?
I actually I don't know the numbers.
Yeah,
it's got to be pretty low
You know
nowadays.
that significantly less.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be that way. When I play other card games, limited formats are the way I enjoy the game, because I'm not willing to spend a lot for the full collection. So it makes me sad. Arena was the format that I played the most when Hearthstone first came out because I really liked it, and it was new at the time. And that was what I spent most of my money on. And when I casted tournaments, constructed and Fight Night, all my knowledge was based on arena stuff. I didn't know anything really about constructed. I love arena stuff. And it's kind of a shame that Blizzard's not really put much more into it than they already have. Like, they did a couple of adjustments, made it to 12 wins. They've adjusted some of the rewards and scaled stuff, but it's wildly inconsistent with like how they designed for it. Things like the League of Explorers Warriors rarities were great, but then now we have, Firelands Portal and everything else being extremely swingy, and the perception also continues to get worse too, with like Mage being a very big auto pick and stuff. So Arena's in a really bad state, and they definitely can improve it a lot. I think, one thing that I would like Blizzard to do is to actually just to give us an update on what they're actually doing. They say that they're working on this cool tool to improve Arena, but they're not telling us what they're doing. So they make us think that they're just saying it, so that way we stop whining about it. And that's a really unfortunate consequence of just even talking about it on the internet, is that once you say even the inkling of it and you don't really share much else, and then say that tool actually sucks and it doesn't actually go through.
Oh my god!
And then there's just like say their obvious inclination would just be like, well, we're just not going to do it. Then should we say anything to the public? Probably not. But then they kind of let us know this small thing, and then they didn't do anything ever about it again. So I personally would love someone on the Arena team. Benbro would be like, here's Arena specialist XYZ, and that person in XYZ is like, hi, we're working on this tool. We're thinking about having it, adjust these pick rates or whatever. Like whatever they're talking about, because he hinted towards it. That would go such a long way to just kind of show people that they're really trying to figure out a good solution, not just be like, well, we're just going to make Mage get half the chance you can get picked in arenas. Like it's not an elegant solution,
inelegant. It's so inelegant. It's like Purify being deleted. I am actually I still don't get. I get why they did it, but I still can't think that that's the right way to ever fix that problem. So my understanding from that, and we talked about it last time, is I think they're simply revamping so much of it that deletion of Purify and Arena is not going to matter in the long run. Like something will be changed about the way picks happen or classes happen, that Purify, like that change being inelegant, just won't matter some months down the line. That's kind of how I look at it.
To be frank, I was shocked that they actually did that.
Yeah.
So in some ways, it's good that they reacted to it. At the same time, it's like, wow, like if you're gonna do that with Arena, like why aren't you doing some of those type of changes with some of the other things we're asking? But obviously that was they felt very strongly about that. There's no way that they would do that unless they just and made a video saying they made a mistake. I mean, it had to be something extremely.
I mean,
major
that already shows something that's cool, but like it's not enough. I really hope that something gets introduced soon. I think the last feature that was introduced, like a real big feature. When I'm talking about feature, I'm not talking about like, oh, the cards now show you properly where that card came from. It's not necessarily that
feature,
or like a special animation. I'm talking about like Tavern Brawl type stuff. I'm talking about like maybe there's a button that shows you where that takes you to a website with fireside gatherings, or a button that like maybe a tournament mode or actual spectator mode features like telestration, for example, for real coaching. Like that kind of stuff I would really love to see. Because this year I don't think we've really gotten much. It's kind of hard to say because Blizzard considers things like being able to be played on iPad as a feature, and it's like, yeah, that is just true. Building a UI completely for mobile is different, but I want to see more like, and fragmentation of the player base is always tricky because you don't want to introduce too many more game modes. But Tavern Brawl is supposed to be new content every week, but it's not satisfying.
Yeah,
it's like we technically get patches in kind of every week. If you think about Tavern Brawl, like all the different stuff that comes in, but it's not enough, man. And I think I'd love to see sealed or some kind of better limited format or something like that that's interesting enough. Maybe maybe sandbox mode that allows us to do other kind of stuff. There's so many things that Hearthstone can do, but they're a little bit behind on the timeline. That's kind of what's really disappointing.
Maybe we just need a bigger design team. Just more bodies.
No, man, it would just get bogged down. Like, I don't know how much you can
answer, but...
Yeah.
As far as like making all that fit together, it's like you can have a bunch of good designs and then you try to implement them. It's like, well, there's this bottleneck.
Whatever.
We can't fit
Engineers,
everything
whatever.
in. So eventually you just get bottlenecked.
All right, well, why don't we take some questions from you guys? Do some. We've been kind of spending over an hour on this, so let's take some questions from you guys, the audience that are viewers that are watching. You can tweet your questions to @ValuetownGG or at me at ChanManV, and I'll start reading them off. Okay, so first question I have, I'll kind of start things off while we're kind of waiting. There is one question from Pickles that says, should Classic Basic be evergreen for Standard? Doesn't it lead to a stale nature of a card game?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But
yes.
Okay, but and this is, people always accuse me for being a Blizzard show, but it's I'm just explaining to you what their logic is. There's just logic to it.
Okay.
There is one.
This is the logic of why they do it. The reason why is because every single game has a major exit, where something dramatic happens in the game. Let's say an expansion comes out, and you just don't like it. That gives you an opportunity to just leave the game. You haven't been enjoying Hearthstone that much, or maybe it's just say you haven't been enjoying some MMO or RPG very much, and then something comes out and you're like, okay, that's it. That's the final straw. I'm just gonna leave here. It's like a good time for me to leave anyways. A lot of times it's when people get banned. They're like, okay, fine. I'm just about to leave anyways. I don't like this game, even though I'm a freaking cheater. All these kinds of people have.
I climbed to the top of the ladder for the good of everyone.
I climbed to the top of the ladder win trading, and now I wanted to leave anyway. So thank you. Thank you for giving me a reason to leave. People have exit points, man. And Standard would be a huge one. Remember when Korea threatened to all leave Hearthstone because they didn't want to play? Blizzard just wanted to reduce the amount of exit points as possible. And one of them would be changing everything that you ever known about the game, like by not having, stand or classic in the Standard rotation. That being said, I disagree with keeping it in forever. I think they just didn't want to say they would change it because they didn't want to be committed to it. My personal theory, I have no confirmation. I've never talked to them about this or never heard them say it, that eventually it won't. Eventually they will have a core set. I think it's stupid to think that we'll be playing, Wild Growth and Fire War Axe and all these other things for the rest of time.
That's the rest
boring
of
as hell. They know that. Yeah, Flame Imp on turn 1, Zoo and Freeze Mage forever. Like, it needs to change. But for now, I think at that time, given what Standard was, that's why they did it the way it is. So that's my theory.
Okay. Another question: What one card would you like to be added to the? If they were to add a card from any of these expansions and not just retire all of them from each of the releases, what one card would you like to see added to the basic or classic set?
You mean come back from all for the expansion that left?
Yeah. So like all the expansion. Yeah.
Shadow Bomber.
Shadow Bomber. Okay.
I'm going with Shadow Bomber, dude. I want an interesting priest archetype that isn't heal my shit until I die.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
I just want another type of priest, but it's like tangential.
How about you?
I'd probably go with Zombie Chop. Oh, sorry.
Or even upcoming. Like, let's just say the existing ones that we see right now. Like at the end of the year or the beginning of next year, we're going to retire all these pretty key expansions that we see in the meta right now. What one card would you keep?
Probably. It's hard. I want to say something like Finley because I think he's really cool.
All the
people are going to immediately
think
they'll probably think of Finley as an aggro card, but I mean Finley does open up a lot of possibilities for stuff. Primarily, like say you're a hunter that doesn't want to just go face all the time. You want to have like anything else to play a little bit more defensive and play controller style, assuming that's possible.
Eventually.
In the archetypes. Yeah. I think Finley's a really cool card. Very well balanced for 1-mana legendary. Like super hard to do legendaries at low cost that aren't just like completely busted or just useless.
Yeah.
Very well done.
Yeah.
With a bit of randomness. Good stuff.
That's true. That's definitely it is a little bit of randomness, but it's that one's not too bad. Given that the point of the card is to switch,
it's bad when you stack it with
bad.
everything else, but on its own it's perfectly fun. Honestly, I love Finley.
Yeah.
I mean, I think all the adventurers that
I think Reno's
introduced were just good.
Reno's the one for me. I'd like to see Reno added, just because it opens up.
Reno's pretty good too.
It gives them more design space too, to like from a heal, like giving everybody a potential.
Even
heal.
Elise.
Yeah.
I'll take Elise as well.
It's true. Let's see. We got okay. Blue Spark has a question for you, Frodan. Who's your favorite caster to watch and to cast, and then another question to cast with?
To watch. I mean, look at is Lothar, obviously.
Look at this Lothar.
I watch Lothar every night.
Okay, all right.
Even the rebroadcast.
He is a handsome caster.
Hey, sorry, I'm wrapping up here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
to cast with these days, it's kind of hard to say. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess combination of like Reynad or TJ. Like TJ and I get along really well. Me and Reynad really well.
all right. How about one question? Then we gotta go. Since you gotta go. Let's see. Matthew Woodgate. Do you feel Sylvanas is going to make any other potential 6-drops in the future OP for them to see play?
That was a fear people had a while back.
Yeah.
If anything, I think cards like Sylvanas just make cards like Moonglade Portal, difficult to actually make. But it's one of those really fringe situations. I don't think like Sylvanas as a 6-drop was cut out of a lot of decks for a while. Like,
yeah.
it's like it used to be
slow.
good in Druid, and then suddenly everybody's like, "Fuck this card! It's too slow," or it doesn't do what I need it to do in this deck. But yeah, she's always gonna have like some use in a lot of. I mean, we're talking about a metagame where N'Zoth is played. Like, when do you really see Sylvanas outside of those N'Zoth decks, or Warrior killing it themselves? It's like it's okay, but it's not this broken thing.
Yeah, I don't see it being that limiting either.
Yeah.
Rodan, what do you think? Power wise, it's pretty different.
Nah, I think Sylvanas is like an example of also like extremely controllable randomness. You can play around her very well. A lot of people, and also Sylvanas is it's a skill card. Like people mess up playing against Sylvanas all the time.
Cthulhu on an empty board against Control Warrior, you're like, thanks.
Yeah, or vice versa, they like don't trade into her properly, or they choose to ignore her, but then forget about what opponents can do to it, or for example, people save Sylvanas to steal Cthunes because they know that they want to revive their Cthunes. It's like there's a lot of like interesting use of it, and because it's counted as a polymorph / steal, so you don't kill Cthulhu.
I love
Sylvanas is a great card. I don't really think that she pushes. I mean, her power level is pretty strong, but I like her being that.
Important question. So when Sylvanas steals Yogg in the middle of casting, should you be getting credit for all those?
Yes, fuck Yogg.
Don't you?
You do.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah, you do.
If
What am I talking about? Yeah,
Sylvanas
it switches, right? It switches at that point.
Yeah. You draw a card.
That's right. It's only happened to me once, so I totally forgot. So
it
works
that
the
way.
it should. Yeah. Okay.
That's how it should be.
Yeah.
It should be true randomness. Like any person can cast Flame Strike. So that your opponent casts Flame Strike. It's like, oh crap! I cast Flame Strike on myself.
I mean, if they cast Twisting Nether, then I guess it doesn't matter either way.
Yeah, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. It's only happened to me once. How many times has it happened to you? You guys don't play Sylvanas when Yogg's potential, right?
I mean,
never. I knew the interaction and never played into it.
Yeah.
So.
All right, well, why don't we wrap up? Fantastic show, man. It's awesome having you on, Dan. It seems to always be a good show. I should have you on more, but you're so freaking busy, so that's why I ask.
I have a lot to say. I'm sorry today that I took up so much.
No, it's great. It's exactly.
No worries, dude. It's actually just nice to have a guest who talks. It's like sometimes we'll run into these shows where not enough is said. Well,
they're still awesome
for every single show we've had silence on.
What do you think about the wing? Pretty good.
Yeah,
the wing?
I like it.
How was the wing? Oh, the wing was pretty good. How'd you like the boss?
Good. I like this card.
Yeah. Pause and then all right, let's start a new topic.
All right, so
let's wrap up.
This deck? Oh, this deck's not that good. Not that good. Yeah.
Those great interviews. Those are the best.
What have you been playing?
Those are the best.
Hey, thank you for that. Thank you for the analysis.
All right, we're gonna go back to the analyst test now. It's like immediately, right? But okay, yeah. Let's just do some shout outs. Frodan, any shout outs you want to do, or where can people find you?
A big shout out to like all the people who are actually like really vocal and active. I completely recognize that people complain because they care about it. So even though it does annoy me a lot that some people make some false assumptions about stuff, or like they just have very bad arguments of stuff, the point is that they care, and they care enough to say stuff. So a big shout out to like the community for always being super active. I hope you guys like don't end up just quitting out of frustration. Things will probably get a little bit worse, but they'll get better over time. And we can suffer together. Because when you suffer by yourself, it's a miserable experience. But when you suffer with others, it's a bonding experience. So let's bond. And then
Sounds
of course,
good.
shout out to Chan. Thanks so much for hosting, and then big shout out to the Temple Storm guys too. They helped me a lot with a bunch of stuff too, and we're gonna be doing some cool stuff in 2017. That's not Blizzard related.
So we heard.
Yes.
So we heard.
Yeah, keep your
Yes.
eyes and ears tuned.
Cool stuff, guys. Cool stuff. Coming. Noxious, how about you? Shout outs, and where can people find you?
No, just shout out to you just for putting the show together without any help. I mean, I wasn't even around when you came up with this whole topic, so that was pretty cool. And as far as the rest of shout outs, probably just a big shout out to Complexity. At this, like right now, I feel like the team's doing pretty well. A lot of people in the team are burnt out, but I'm hoping it's gonna get better. I think a lot of us are sticking around for the long haul despite some of the issues that we're running into right now. So, yeah. Shout out to the devs if you're listening. Please.
please
Help.
please do something.
We're
They
dying
are
here.
listening. They are listening.
Yeah, they are
they-
definitely
for
listening.
sure they are.
But
But,
that's the
yeah.
great thing.
Big-
Send them an
big
email
thing.
sometimes, Noxious.
Every day.
every
They always ask,
day.
like, why doesn't anyone talk
Oh
to
my
us?
God, it's
They
in the
always just
spam
post
folder.
it on Twitter immediately.
Really?
Like, send them an
Report
email
spam.
sometimes.
Okay.
And
I always
they
think it's
might
gonna get
respond.
lost in a sea of
You just
the salt.
then,
like
then,
a
then
GBA.
send it to me and I'll send it.
Okay.
You know.
Sounds
It's
good.
in the form
I
of a
will.
book. It's in the form of a book.
Blizzard shill confirmed.
There you go.
It's
Send it to the Blizzard employee. You'll
liaison.
make it.
Okay, guys, not shill. Liaison.
Liaison's the word.
All right. Well, I want to thank you guys. I want to thank Backspace too for coming on earlier and just talking with her, doing an interview pertaining to the Archon announcement. And Frodan, of course, and Frodan's last minute, like literally, Frodan's like, "Hey, you need me on Value Town today out of the blue, and we can talk about the current state of Hearthstone." I'm like, "All right, let's do it." So, thanks for doing that, man. Last minute. That's sometimes those are that's the cool part about just organizing these shows. Sometimes it's like you never know what's going to happen until like we literally go live, and so that's really, really cool. And then Noxious, of course, always doing these things with me, man. It's a lot better. You were just saying alone. It's a lot better doing these shows not alone anymore.
Suffering
So
together.
yeah, exactly. So I appreciate everything you do for Value Town too. Big thanks to Temple Storm and their sponsors. You can see the sponsors right there, G2A, Twitch, and Curse for sponsoring the show. And everybody else that tweeted questions. I know we didn't get a chance to read out your questions, but, we kind of got to go. So you can check out the VODs on youtube.com/ChanManV after the show. And if you're on iTunes, thanks for all the 5-star reviews. We actually had a few 5-star reviews that I'm going to have to give a shout out to next week because I don't have them in front of me. And then a few shout outs to just the Patreons that support the show too. Devin Westfall, Cameron McMillan, Nicholas Lariviere, Eric Lynn, Lucas Capdeville, Andrew Parent, just to name a few. That's going to be it for Value Town this week, guys. So for Frodan, Noxious, Backspace, and myself, ChanManV, we'll see you next week. Later.